Okay. So what does a typical implementation journey look like from discovery to delivery?
Yeah. So the first, the very first stage, really, unless someone has a very, very specific process in mind, the very first bit is what we've talked about, which is needs analysis and creating a roadmap. The After that, we go through the matrix as I described, and you end up with a short list of a few potential processes to look at with intelligent automation. So on that basis, you then use a business analyst to understand the process. And one thing that's really important for people to understand is that a process, what we would describe, what all of us would describe as a process, is people in an office doing something. That would be the process. And people should be mindful of the fact that the human process is often very different to what can be done technically and what would need to happen technically. So the first bit, the discovery part, is about analyzing that process, getting what's called the as is. So as the process is currently done, and this is very much literally a workflow. Jamie picks up an invoice, he types it into Excel, it then goes through to finance and having swim lanes of where all this stuff is moving around and how it's happening. You then, or we then, when we do it, you then solutionize and create what's called a 2B. So what is this process going to look like once we start to implement some intelligent automation into it? That gets signed off by the client, and then it goes into development. It then goes into systems integrations testing to make sure that we can integrate correctly with the live systems. And then it goes into user acceptance testing, and then it goes live. But it doesn't stop there. It's really important to note that it doesn't stop there. A lot of people think you build something, you put it out there, and that's it. The reality is that there's so many moving parts with these things that it's constantly monitored, managed, and looked after, or should be, because if you start to rely on these new types of system, and this is something that people need to think about, if you're going to implement a system that processes all your invoices, for example, as a simple example, if that stops for any reason, that could cause a massive hold up or bottleneck in the business. So it's really important that people understand what happens if it stops, what to do in the meantime whilst it's potentially being repaired, and how to handle that, because as more and more businesses start to implement more and more intelligent automation, effectively those processes are going to become part of a digital system. And it's important that businesses do the risk kind of management on that as well, and understand what happens if there are problems.
Okay, so what's the role of a roadmap in ensuring that the implementation actually sticks and delivers value?
Yeah, so I always liken it to a business plan. So I'm sure we've all heard that, a lot of people think that a business plan is a nice thick document, looks pretty, and then you put it in the drawer and leave it there, which is the worst thing you can do. A business plan is a living, breathing object, and a roadmap is exactly the same, because really what you're doing is you're fine tuning your first kind of opportunities. You've developed those opportunities based on the longer term or mid to long term roadmap. But then what you do is revisit and say, okay, did this work well? How could we improve it next time? What did we learn from it? What are we not going to do next time? What's the feedback from the staff and the teams? And it becomes an ever evolving document to ensure that you stay on track and you're constantly improving.
Okay, so how do you balance quick wins with longer term strategic automation goals?
Yeah, it's the matrix that I mentioned before is effectively kind of broken down into four quadrants, and it's the combination of
Right,
that someone's just fallen off
could
their
we stay
chair.
on mute? Oh, yeah, looks like we're okay
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Where the particular opportunities sit within that matrix will determine the order of what you do. So one of them is the quick wins. So that's going to be the ones which are high benefit and low complexity. You then want to start planning for the longer term things. These are the ones that are going to have a really big benefit, but potentially are highly complex. You then move into the kind of low hanging fruit. So not so much benefit, but also pretty low complexity. And finally, the very long term improvements, which are going to have a little bit of benefit and are potentially not so complex. So it's all about using that matrix to come up with a plan, and how you prioritize and order those things.